Hi everybody, welcome back to Crafting and Crime Daily. I'm Rebecca, I'm your host, and I am going to recap some live trials for you today while you craft. First, I'm going to have some coffee. Delicious. I'm going to close it up so it stays nice and warm in this cold weather. Oh my goodness, what am I knocking over back here? Oh! My little Halloween gnome thing. Let's put that right here, shall we? Yeah. Anyway, it's not going to stay up. We got to find a place for this poor little guy. How are you today? It's Monday. Did you have a good weekend? I did. I listened to both these trials. So interesting. I will timestamp everything because I've got a lot to talk about today. The show's probably going to be a little bit lengthier than normal. I'm not going to break it up into multiple videos. Just know that it is a long video if you want to listen to the whole thing. If you can't sit around and listen to it while you're crafting, it's also available as a podcast on YouTube Music, and you listen to it while you walk your animals or you're on the go. There you go. Okay, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, consider becoming a member. On Tuesday night, I'm going to have a members only giveaway. I'm going to do a special pop-up live Halloween show. And I am making a pumpkin hat. It's almost done to give away to a member of Patreon. You can become a member or you can become a Patreon. I'll know that you became one between now and then. And I'll put your name on the wheel and we'll draw a winner. We're also going to do a grand prize winner to people that have been participating in Craft or Treat 2023 with myself and DP Addiction Adventures. It was so much fun. I had so much fun with this event. You people were awesome. And your paintings turned out terrific. Oh my goodness, I loved them. Crystal Canvas Arts Design. Check them out. Crystal Canvas US on the internet if you want to look at their designs. They were stunning. The pumpkin that I did, both of them. I'm still working on finishing up the floral one. I'll show you what I have done on it so far. Just the top part, yeah. Then we're getting down into the pumpkin, yeah. And the bottom part is already done. So I've just kind of got a little bit in the middle that I have to finish up. The lower half of the pumpkin, but I will be working on those after Halloween still, I'm sure. And November 1st, I'm going to start a paint along with another small channel. It's called Color and Chat with Joanna. Check her out. We're trying to get her to 1,000. She's very close. And we are going to be doing this Yumi art painting. And so for the month of November, you'll get to watch us diamond paint this gorgeous Yumi art painting. Anime. She's playing the violin. How gorgeous is that? I have to sit and figure out what enhancements I want to do and then order them. But first, we're going to talk about, what should we do first? Let's do the Ortho Wallace case. Now, I'm time stamping. If you don't want to hear about the Ortho Wallace case, you can skip to Kowalski. Just look down in the description and you hit that timestamp of where you want to go. Or if you want to skip right to the Adelson, skip to the Adelson. Or you can listen to all three. Okay, let's talk about the Adelson case. Let me get back to that. Where is it? I'm going to buy a new notebook here. I am going through notebooks like crazy. All right, so I saw this on YouTube. Ortho Wallace sentencing. I'm like, that sounds familiar. It is familiar. Ortho Wallace is the African-American gentleman who was parked in front of his apartment building where he was living with his baby mama, and he had backed into the parking space. It's like 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. It's dark. He's sitting in his car, conducting his business on his cell phone, whatever. And actually, his testimony was he was getting ready to get out of the vehicle when he sees a police officer pull up in front of him. This is in Daytona Beach. Officer Jason Rayner pulls in front of him. Now, earlier that evening, there had been a BOLO, a be on the lookout for a specific kind of vehicle, which is what Ortho Wallace happened to be sitting in. Now, it wasn't the vehicle that they were looking for, but Officer Rayner didn't know that, so he was just going to find out, who is this guy sitting in this vehicle, and probably run it, get his driver's license, see if he's wanted for anything, see if the vehicle's stolen, run the tag on the vehicle. 20 minutes he would have been come and gone. And this Ortho could have gone in and lived the rest of his life with his family. Here's what really happened. Officer Rayner pulls in front of him. He sees the officer. He's getting out of his vehicle. Officer Rayner approaches him and says, "Hey, how you doing?" Friendly. And he's like, "What do you want? What do you want?" And what'd I do? What'd I do? Tell me what I did, And he's like, "Hey, no, just have a seat, have a seat." And he wouldn't do it. So they go, he tries to get away from Officer Rayner. He tries to flee. Officer Rayner goes after him, and there's a struggle. Ortho Wallace had a weapon, and he shot Officer Rayner in the face, took out his eye. Then he stands over him, and he's says some expletives that I'm not going to repeat. Doesn't call 911. Meanwhile, nobody knows where Officer Rayner is because he didn't say where he was when he stopped or when he pulled in front of this vehicle. He didn't say he was out at such and such an address or anything like that. So they have to trigger a GPS to figure out where he's at, and the sergeant has the ability to figure out where people are at because he can look on the map and see where different people are at different locations. So they find him, rush him to the hospital. He lives for about 3 months and then passes away. Well, Daytona Beach is so distraught over this, the citizens of Daytona Beach, including the police officers, that they have a change of venue. They tried this case in Orlando. The jury deliberated for 24 hours over several days. And you could tell from the questioning that they were told, don't worry about what happens if you reach certain verdicts. Don't worry about what happens. So to me, that meant they were probably hung, but they didn't know what the consequences of a hung jury were going to be. Because what they were asking basically is he going to go? Does he go free if we say that we're hung? So they came up with a compromised verdict. They came back manslaughter. Is that a first degree murder for a guy who shot somebody in the face for no reason? Um, so this judge reviewed over 20 letters sent on behalf of the defendant and on behalf of Jason Rayner, his family, his coworkers, the city of Daytona Beach. They had so many people speak. The one that moved me the most was the chief of police, the Daytona Beach chief of police, who is African American. He was not going along with the defendant's plea for leniency and a downward departure from the mandatory 30-year sentence that he was going to get for this compromised manslaughter conviction. So he talked about how it affected the family. He said, I was new to being a police chief when this occurred, and I had never had to hand a loved one a flag, a representative of their deceased loved one, and I had to fold and hand out two, one to mom and one to dad in this case. He goes, it broke my heart. Then he talked about the effect on the police. He said that a lot of officers quit. They just said, we don't want to do it. It's too dangerous. We don't want to be police officers anymore. The officers that still wanted to be police officers, a lot of them left because they didn't want to be police officers in Daytona Beach, Florida. He said we were down 40 officers at a 200 officer department. We were down 40 officers because of what happened to Jason Rayner. He says we're just now, several years later, getting back up to full staff. So he said, Your Honor, I believe that the maximum sentence in this case is non-negotiable. All this guy had to do was comply with the police officer. All you had to do was be quiet and sit down. None of this would have happened. So the judge, he commented that, to what degree does a person have to comply when they're not compelled to comply by the law? But he was not moved to make a downward departure. No. He said, I'm going to sentence you to the 30 years in prison. Now, he'll get gain time. It is what it is because he got convicted of manslaughter. But he also got credit for 840 days. So he'll be out of jail in not long. Not long. Yeah. And the judge did comment. He says, I'm not here to solve any social issues. But I will say that words matter. Words matter. And that's what he left it. And this is the case where Ortho Wallace, even before this happened and after this happened, he went on social media saying that he was going to get him some pigs. Now, he says he was referring to something else. Yeah, but I don't believe it. Yeah. All right. So that was the sentencing of Ortho Wallace. Then we have, let's switch over to the Adelson trial. Wendy Adelson. She's also a lawyer. She's been a lawyer since 2006. She met Dan Markel in the fall of 2004. Now, Wendy is the brother of Charlie Adelson. Wendy is also the ex-wife of Dan Markel, who was the murder victim in this trial. Charlie's on trial for being the mastermind to have hired Catherine, who hired the hitman. Catherine was his, this is so circuitous. Okay. Wendy's brother Charlie's on trial for having his girlfriend Catherine hire her ex-baby daddy, her ex-boyfriend, Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera, to commit the murder of Dan Markel. And we believe that, a lot of people believe that Mom and Dad Adelson are also involved. And they are all being called unindicted co-conspirators. Now, Wendy Adelson is appearing on the stand with use immunity. So what that means is she's been subpoenaed. She doesn't have any choice. She has to be there. But anything that she says during this trial, the 2 trials that she's appeared in beforehand, if she's ever arrested, and there's a good possibility she could be arrested. Anything she says on the stand cannot be used against her in her own trial. Should that ever happen? I want to be Georgia. How many times are you going to try this case, girl? Georgia Kappelman is the state attorney that's trying this case. And she tried the last 2. Unfortunately, we have a new judge, and that's going to come into play during this testimony. So she talks about how she met Dan Markel in the fall of 2004. She doesn't say that she met him on a Jewish online dating site, which we know that she did, JDate. She says she met him when she went to Washington. I think they were already corresponding by this time. But anyway, she says that's when she met him, when she went to Washington. We know that after he graduated from law school, he took a job in Washington. So she meets him there. She's in law school at the University of Miami. So they start this long distance relationship that's hot and heavy, and they get married in February of 2006. So not long after they're dating, a little over a year after they're dating. She said from August of 2005 to June of 2006, they lived in Tallahassee. Originally, when they got married, they lived in Tallahassee. But then they moved down to Miami for a year because he thought he was going to be able to get a job at the University of Miami. She was going to law school there. And she finished her law school. He did not get the job. So they went back to Tallahassee, where he was offered a professorship, tenured position at Florida State University. And because he was coming with his wife, who was also a lawyer, they offered her a job as well, but not as a professor. She was not a law professor. She she worked doing some immigration projects out of the campus, but she was not tenured, so they could have released her at any time, unlike her husband. So she said the boys at the time of the murder, they have two little boys that were 4 and 3 at the time of the murder. They had been dropped off at daycare. They were with Dan that night. He gave them breakfast, dropped them off at daycare. He goes to the gym, comes back to his house, and that's when he's murdered. They are now 14 and 13 years old. Yay, teenagers, love them. Um, and she does admit, and there was no love lost between the prosecutor, Miss Kappelman, and Wendy Adelson. She admitted that, yes, she did move out when he was away on a business trip. Took everything, everything. She had already rented a house, took everything. While he wasn't abusive, was he? No, but he was emotionally abusive. But she said, but she goes, it wasn't a surprise to him. I called him and I told him I was leaving him. But you didn't tell him you were taking all the furniture and his tennis racket. You took his tennis racket. Okay. Um, so she says that unbeknownst to her whole family, she didn't tell anybody in her family that they were getting marriage counseling before this. It just didn't work. Interesting. Am I still hooked up? Yep. Got to make sure the microphone's on. Okay. So they had 50-50 shared custody, and she went over the whole custody arrangement. It was kind of a weird arrangement that they had. And she was shown some emails between her and her mom. Here's the emails between you and your mom. It is a big old binder, 3-inch binder. So she takes them and she looks through them. She's looking. She goes, these are the emails that my mom sent to me because I didn't give you my emails. So they had apparently asked her for her emails and she just didn't give them to them. So in these emails, mom is saying that the divorce is negatively affecting uh, their parents' income and her brother's income. How, I don't know, but her mom was saying, you got to, this is the position you got to take. You got to, you're a good actress. You got to, play this one up. So she said that her mom, because didn't your mom dislike Dan Markel? No, she liked Dan. No, my parents were planning to move to Tallahassee. They were going to buy a house. Okay. She denied that her mom was manipulating the children, the lives of the children, which is what was alleged in that pleading. Um, she did say that Charlie talked to her mom a lot, that they were very, very close. She said that her mom was not angry at Dan Markel. Nope. So then she was impeached by Georgia Kappelman, showing her the transcript of the police interview that she gave, and where she mentions that Charlie, she says, I was just trying to think of everything I could think of. And she threw Charlie under the bus. Like he was the first one she came up with, couldn't be my brother Charlie. And my mom really likes Dan, so it couldn't be my mom. And, she's like, I was just, she goes, I was there for a long time and I was just trying to give them anything I could give them, that might be a lead, but I really didn't think that my family would do any of this. So then she was talking about, she was shown a binder of the pleadings. Like, here's another binder. Here you go. And Georgia walks her through all of the pleadings in this divorce case. And, they get simpler and then they get more and more complicated as time passes to the point, and more venomous as time passes, to the point where it's contempt and sanctions and, that they're asking for, which is really serious. Get a contempt on a lawyer is very, very serious. And they do have a lawyer come later on and testify just how serious that is. If you found in contempt of court, you could lose your law license. So she's like, no, my mother never saw that pleading. So this is the pleading that, the very last pleading that was filed by Dan Markel's lawyer, on behalf of Dan before he was murdered. And that was accusing Grandma Adelson, Donna Adelson, of manipulating her children, calling him stupid, um, demeaning him in front of the children. So he was asking that the court make them have supervised visitations. So Wendy says, oh no, my mom never saw that. And so you didn't think, she goes, I didn't think that he had much chance of being successful. So that pleading didn't bother you. No, it didn't bother me at all. But you forwarded it to 12 people, and she mentioned all people that she forwarded that pleading to, including her mom. So then she's going through the emails again, and she's like, your mom called him an a-hole, a bully, a religious zealot, an effer. Yeah. Then she talked again about how her husband was emotionally abusive. And she said, well, isn't it true you just felt stuck in Tallahassee? She goes, no, that's not true. I had a really nice life. I really liked Tallahassee. So then she walked her through her book. Did you write a book? She wrote a book. And I haven't read this book. My understanding of this book is that one of the characters in the book mimics Wendy Adelson. She's living in this small town that mimics Tallahassee, and she hates it, and she feels like she's stuck there. And Wendy says, "Oh no, that's not what this was about." She explains what the book was about. It was about immigration and whatever. Dan Markel never read the book. He didn't. It wasn't his kind of thing. Anyway, that wasn't her testimony. I just know that from the prior trials. So then they talked about mom's idea to bribe Dan Markel with $1 million to get him to move from Tallahassee to South Florida so they could all come to South Florida, the boys, Wendy, and then he could commute to FSU. So it was going to be a bribe. But Wendy said, no, I did not want to do that. I told my mom, I don't want to do that. So then she talked about this settlement agreement that the settlement agreement said Dan was supposed to give her half of the proceeds of the house, or half the value of the house, if she would go take her name off the house. So she goes and she takes her name off the title of the house. He never gives her money. He says, nope, I'm not giving you the money because I found out you lied on your financial affidavit and you shorted it by $200,000, your income. That's a no-no. Yeah. All right, so there was a part 2. She had to come back the next day, Wendy did, because they got through the openings and then part of Wendy's testimony. So she comes back the next morning. So she talks about the morning of the murder, July 18th, that her mother texted her to tell her the TV repairman was on the way. So she was staying home so that what do they call them at Best Buy? The Geek Squad could come by her house and fix the TV that her brother had bought her as a divorce present because it was cheaper than hiring a hitman. She said, oh, that was just a joke my brother made in very poor taste. But you repeated the joke, didn't you? I did repeat the joke. First she said no, but then she admitted she repeated the joke. And wasn't the TV just a synonymous with the murder of Dan Markel? No. It wasn't code for anything. So she's waiting for this TV repairman. He comes. The window was like between 10 and 12. So he comes out. He tells her that it doesn't make sense to repair this TV because it's going to cost you more than it would cost you if you just go and buy a new TV. So she sends him off on his way, and then she had gotten this invitation to go to a party that night, and she needed it was a stock the bar party where I guess they send out invitations to the party and they tell different people what kind of liquor to bring. So she was supposed to bring bourbon to stock the bar. And instead of going to liquor stores that were closer to her house, she decided she would go over to her old house on Trescott Drive, not knowing that Dan Markel had been murdered that morning. She goes over to, and then she was, because she says, I have a very poor sense of direction and I know how to get to the liquor store from my old house. So she goes over to Trescott Drive. She sees the police tape up. She sees something going on. And she thinks, I forget what she thought it was, but certainly didn't think there was a murder of her ex-husband. So she sees the police barrier. She sees a police car there. So she backs up and she goes to the liquor store a different way. She buys the bourbon. Then she goes to a restaurant called Mosaic and meets some of her friends there. She's having lunch when the police come into the restaurant. I don't know how they found her there. They come into the restaurant and they say, something's happened to your ex-husband. We need you to come down to the police station. They bring her down to the police station for an interview. They tell her, the first thing they tell her is that he's been shot and he's not expected to survive. She boo-hoos and dramatically for several minutes, and then they have some interesting conversations in which she throws her brother under the bus for telling this joke. Oh, it was just a joke. He would never really do that. At this point, they have no idea that it was Hitman that killed. They don't know it was Hitman until they find surveillance footage later on of these two men following Dan. Yeah, so it took them 2 years to put all the puzzle pieces together for this case. So she makes this comment during the last part of the interview that Georgia confronts her with, and it gets pretty heated. I want you to watch this clip. After this clip, I kept the camera, I kept the clip going because I want you to see how upset Wendy is. Like, she is shaking and trying to do some deep breathing to get control of herself, but you can tell how pissed off she is. Okay, then the next person to take the stand that I watched, Jeff Lacoste. Jeff Lacoste is he is actually, I think he teaches literature at FSU. He's a professor, but not a law professor. Okay, I need more coffee. He is the ex-boyfriend of Wendy Adelson. This is the guy she was dating. Uh, I think they dated for several months. At the time of the murder, she had broken up with him 4 days before the murder. Officially broken up, but she was being wishy-washy a few weeks before the murder. So he talks about how whenever they would go out, the primary topic of conversation was usually centered around the divorce with Dan Markel and what pleadings had been filed and who was doing what to whom. And he said he met Charlie Adelson one time when he and Wendy went down to South Florida to visit. It was in March of 2018. They go down to South Florida. They have dinner at a place called Yardbirds. And on cross, she was asked, did you know that Sigfredo Garcia, one of the hitmen, was in the parking lot watching you guys? Because at that dinner was she and Jeff Lacoste, Charlie, and Catherine Magbanua. And supposedly, Sigfredo Garcia was in the parking lot watching them. It's just, of course, she didn't know that, or he didn't know that. So he said after they have this dinner, and he says the conversation was really mostly Charlie just bragging about himself. Um, I think Kay remembers Catherine Magbano talking about like maybe where she went to school and things like that. It was just chit chat. So afterwards, they go to Charlie's house where they stayed for the night, but they go into the hot tub. Charlie uh, and Wendy, brother and sister, and Jeff Lacoste, her boyfriend, and Charlie's roommate. Catherine did not follow them back to Charlie's house. She went home to be with her kids. During the time that they were in the hot tub, Jeff says Charlie was bragging about how he had contacts on both sides of the tracks. I've got some ins with the Cuban community, and I'm in with the, middle class community. I'm on both sides of the tracks. He didn't really think much of it, because he didn't know he was going to have to testify in a murder trial someday. So then he talks about how he and Wendy had coffee at a place called Red Eye Coffee when she abruptly canceled the trip to go see his parents. He said she was serious, really, really serious about the relationship. She was having the boys call him dad, and she was meeting his parents, and he was meeting her parents, and she abruptly cancels the trip. And he said that night he goes to her home, and she is a nervous wreck. That she was vomiting, and she just and the reason she canceled the trip was that they were supposed to be gone from July 11th through the 17th, and she didn't think they would get back in time for her. She was scheduled to pick up the boys from their preschool at 5 p.m. on the 18th, and she was afraid they wouldn't get back in time. I mean, wouldn't she just tell Dan to pick them up? But July 18th was the date of the murder. Did she know he was going to be murdered? So June 4th through the 9th, that's when the killers, the hitmen, were in Tallahassee for the first time. Remember, they kind of chickened out, came back home, and then came back in July. So this is when he had gone to her house, and he said she was a nervous wreck. To the point where he left. He went to the drugstore and bought her something to settle her stomach. And there was another time where he remembers going to her house to watch a movie. He rented from Redbox How to Train Your Dragon. You got to go outside. Come on. Come on. I don't want to. There you go. Good girl. So he goes over to her house, and the television's broken with the, and he says, "What happened?" And she's telling him that the two little boys were playing, and something. One of them threw a toy, and it hit the TV and broke it. He said he just didn't think that either one of these little 3 and 4-year-old would have enough strength to do the damage that he saw on this TV. And he said, I told her, it's not going to be worth fixing. You might as well just go buy a new one. Let me go buy one for you. She wouldn't let him go buy one. So he continued testifying that on July 1st, Wendy went to her father's birthday party. Apparently, there was some rumored big gift that he was going to get. He didn't know what that was. And Wendy, when she testified, she couldn't recall what the big gift was. So he said, no, I was not invited to Dad's birthday party, so he didn't go. When she returns on July 14th, she stayed down there for 2 weeks. When she returns, she called him and said, let's go out for dinner. And he said she was all eager to go out with me. So they go out for dinner, and she says, can I tell you something in confidence? Well, at this point, there are objections flying through the courtroom. And there had been a prior motion in limine filed by the defense where he had argued this was hearsay, this statement that she made to Jeff during this dinner date, and that it shouldn't come in. There was no exception that it would fit under. Well, during her testimony, she was asked by the state attorney, did you tell your ex-boyfriend, Jeff Lacoste, that how did she put it? That your brother Charlie actually really did look into hiring him. Didn't you say that to your ex-boyfriend? No, that's not true. I never said that. So Georgia was asking Jeff Lacoste this question, knowing that what he's going to say, that she said this to him and to impeach her, to show the jury that she was lying. And so they will go sidebar and they argue for a little bit. Finally, the judge sends the jury away, and he comes back and they argue about it. So in open court, so we can hear what the argument's about. And this defense attorney was just having a fit, like a 3-year-old, like temper tantrum. It's not fair, you know. Because he says, if I'd have known she was going to go into this, I would have asked Wendy certain questions, and I didn't. At one point, the judge just sat there staring at his computer like he was revisiting some of his life choices. Like, why did I become a lawyer or a judge? So he actually asked the attorneys to take a 5-minute break, go do some research, come back. When he came back, he said, "I've reached a decision because of the doctrine of fairness." And Kappelman did tell them at sidebar that she wasn't going to go into this line of questioning. And she said, "Here's what I actually said. I said that I wouldn't go into this hearsay unless there was an exception. She sat on the stand this morning and lied, so I was going to go into it." So they brought Jeff Lacoste back in, and he testified about what she said, but it wasn't in front of the jury. It was a proffer, an offer of proof for appellate purposes later on. So everybody calmed down, and they brought the jury back in, and they didn't have many more questions from him, to be honest. But he did mention to the jury, they didn't go into it, I don't know why, but he said he felt like he was being set up for the murder. Because they went into a lot of it with him in the prior trials, because he was actually scheduled to leave town on the 19th, I think. Jeff Lacoste was. So he didn't leave town, or he actually left town early and left before the murders on the 18th. And so he had proof of all that. So he wasn't set up for the murder. And then they had Dan's lawyer that he hired on there, and he said that, we were headed for a trial. That's no question. We were headed for a trial on this. It was a very, very contentious divorce. Okay. Then on Friday they had Charlie Adelson's ex-girlfriend, and I know what her testimony is for, but I didn't, because I've heard her testify in the previous trial, but I didn't get to listen to all of it. I will bring you that tomorrow. So all right, before you go, let's talk about Kowalski. Maya Kowalski, who's suing Johns Hopkins Hospital for intentional infliction of emotional distress, medical malpractice, wrongful death, anything that will fit in the pot. Let's start. So they put on a pediatric pharmacist, a infusion pharmacist, who happened to work for the same company that Beata worked for. Beata Kowalski, Maya's mother, was an infusion nurse. And he had filled some prescriptions given to Beata for Maya for oral ketamine. But ketamine doesn't come in an oral form. It only comes in IV form. So he gave her 6 bottles when he filled the prescription, 6 bottles. Each bottle had 10 milliliters in the bottle, and 0.5 milliliters would be 50 milligrams. She was allowed to have 50 milligrams twice a day. So each bottle had 20 doses times 6 bottles. So that's a lot of ketamine. And she did testify, Maya did testify that she was getting IV ketamine, but she was getting it orally. Her mom would put it into Gatorade and give it to her. But the defense wants the jury to believe that Beata, who's an IV infusion nurse, wanted to give her the ketamine IV, or was giving her the ketamine IV. either way, she was getting an awful lot of ketamine at home. So then they had Dr. Hannah on the stand. He at one point, Maya was going to Dr. Kowalski. No, Dr. Kowalski. Maya was going to Dr. Kirkpatrick, getting my K's mixed up. And for her, he was the one that diagnosed the CRPS and was treating her with IV ketamine, but it became really, really expensive, I guess, to travel or to afford him. And he recommended this Dr. Hannah, who also did IV ketamine infusions. And Dr. Hannah said that he does them in his office. He talked about how they monitor it and how he administers it and how he starts them out at a very low dose, and he's treated thousands of patients, and they titrate it upwards to manage the pain of these patients. But he said with her, he was running out of the options. The day before she went to the hospital, he had given her IV infusion, over 4 hours of 1,300 milligrams. That's a lot of ketamine, a lot of ketamine. But he didn't feel comfortable giving her any more than that in an office setting. So that was one of a few reasons why he asked father to take her to the hospital. The other was she was having that severe abdominal pain, and he felt like it was because maybe her liver functioning was not where it should be. Because one of the things you have to do when you have someone on ketamine is to monitor the liver function. And if your liver's off, you're going to have extreme abdominal pain. So he thought it might be that. That's why he told Jack to take her over to Johns Hopkins. He said that she had had 55 infusions over 8 months. And then I don't hear this doctor gets really defensive with the hospital attorney. I want you to watch this clip. Yeah, pretty contentious. So he had some interesting things to say. He's very adamant that this is this standard of care, this IV ketamine treatment for CRPS. Hey, stop. Then last witness I'm going to talk about in the Kowalski case over the weekend was a pediatric hospitalist from when she went to Lurie's Hospital in Chicago for a second opinion. This hospitalist examined Maya Kowalski, and she, over the course of her stay, and she said her exam was not consistent with a history of CRPS, and that it was more consistent for a psychiatric component. In other words, conversion disorder or fictitious disorder or Munchausen by proxy. And she felt like she needed an extensive rehab program. And then this was all said to the mom and dad, and they opted to take her back to Florida for rehab. So that's the Kowalski case. Now, I've seen some of your comments to me on the Kowalski case. Be kind. I'm just recapping what is told during his testimony. If you think I have feelings one way or the other, I do not. I am very confused by all this testimony. I think there's some blame to be put on Beata Kowalski. I think there's some blame to be put on to the hospital. And if I'd be, as a juror, I don't know what I would do. I really don't. I certainly want to wait to hear the closings before I make any decisions about my opinions. All right, that's the show for today. Have a great Monday, everybody. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe. It is free. And don't forget, I'm going to be doing a members only giveaway. Yeah. Or the other way to get into that member drawing is if you make a one-time donation to the channel through that super thanks button. Yeah, the one over here is the like. Then you go over here. There's a super thanks that you can make a one-time donation. All right, have a great day, everybody.